I'm not a psychologist or anything like that, but I get the impression that maybe Bruce Wayne is not handling the death of his parents in the most healthy way possible. Thank you so much for checking out the video. Before we get started, click on that red subscribe button and the notification bell. That way you know whenever I post a new piece of content. So we get a new Batman movie. A couple, year or so ago, I did a ranking of all the Batman films, and so now we have a new Batman film. It's appropriately just called The Batman. It's the latest from director Matt Reeves, most well known for doing Cloverfield, Let Me In, and then the second and third of the three Planet of the Apes films. He did Dawn of the Planet of the Apes and War for the Planet of the Apes. Both great movies. I really, really like his work for the most part. I think those movies have some like script challenges and some pacing issues, and but I think they're great. I'm a big fan of his stuff. So excited to see what he was going to do with Batman. There's always a ton of controversy whenever this role is cast, except for Christian Bale. It seems like there's always been some level of outrage. Most of it unjustified, some of it justified. When the original 1989 Batman came out, people wrote, there were 20,000 handwritten letters to Warner Brothers. Because back in the day, no social media, you had to, be an adult and write a letter. And so 20,000 people wrote letters, sent them to Warner Brothers, and said they were not pleased with the casting of Michael Keaton for the role because he was known for, Beetlejuice and Mr. Mom and being like a comedy actor. And people didn't really know what he could do. And obviously that they turned out to be crazy, and he was an inspired and amazing choice for the role. There was similar outcry when Ben Affleck was cast in the role. And of course, the casting of the Joker, was a source of controversy when Heath Ledger landed that part for The Dark Knight. And Pattinson, he turns out to be a great choice. There was no concern to be had there regarding him, so he's great. So yeah, check out the video of my rankings, and let's talk about what I liked. I liked the style of this film. Every single stylistic choice that they made turned out to be the right one. This is a very gritty and dark and nasty version of Gotham City, probably the most cynical of all of them, which is really saying something. In films like The Dark Knight, you could just tell that was Chicago. And they're like, Chicago, corruption, the mob, and then they called it a day. That particular version of Gotham didn't really have a lot of life to it. I liked, of the three Nolan films, I think Batman Begins has the best version of Gotham. And the third film, Dark Knight Rises, was just like smash cut, best, greatest hits of Pittsburgh and New York City. And it felt like you were in one of those two cities at the time, and that's basically it. I don't think he did a particularly great job establishing Gotham as a whole, other than this corrupt bureaucracy. And yeah, so I've got kind of mixed feelings about the whole Nolan verse, but I think this version of Gotham is fantastic. I think it's really, really close to being the best, along with the Keaton universe, because Gotham is such a huge part of what they do, and it's such a huge part of that universe. And I think they really nailed it here. I think this movie you could fit in with Joaquin Phoenix's Joker, and they would work well in this. He would work well in this universe, and vice versa. So I like I said, I'm a huge fan of what they did with this movie and this stylistic choice in particular. The cinematography is great. The decision to make basically a neo-noir film out of the whole thing is awesome. And it's not just a neo-noir film. It's a crime thriller. It's like psychological horror in a sense as well. It's a really, really dark and screwed up movie, and it's a choice that it really works well. And to have this be like the Batman as a detective story that we've never really gotten out of these is great too. I think Nolan had some of that, but not nearly as much as is portrayed here. Having Batman actively working with the cops is kind of cool. That's something we haven't seen before, despite still having his vigilante status and lots of cops being wary of him. That decision, I think, turns out to be a good one. So, Yeah, and Pattinson, what else can you say about the guy? I think he makes a better Batman than he does a Bruce Wayne. And I think that's been the case with some of these guys before. I think with Bale, I actually think he was a better Bruce Wayne because I was really put off by the Bat voice. And Pattinson's Bat voice is like perfect. He just nails it. It's not over the top, it's not obnoxious. And Bruce Wayne is such a recluse in this that I actually kind of bought that maybe people don't know it's him. Because he's like never in public. He's not that. He's a very different Batman than the other ones. Or a very different Bruce than the other ones. This is not an origin story. And I think that's a good decision. We've seen this story played out multiple times on the screen before. And to disregard that and have him specifically 2 years in is a great call. Because he's still learning a lot about himself and what he wants the Batman to be and what is his ultimate goal and purpose in doing this. And having it just kick off like in the middle of his story, I think is fantastic. And it's great. And the villain here is fantastic too. I think Paul Dano is awesome in everything. If you've ever seen Love and Mercy, which is the Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys biopic, it's great. If you've seen Prisoners, a movie I've reviewed and adore, he's awesome in that. And he's really, really good here. And I haven't really heard a lot of people talk about him. And I think he emotes quite a bit using just his voice, and he gets this psycho killer in a mask routine down. And the role is a lot more physically demanding than I thought it would be. And he's basically just like a crazy serial killer, and I'm here for it. Definitely inspired by some fairly famous serial killers. Most notably, by far, is the Zodiac. And the inspiration is extremely obvious, from the ciphers to the costume, the glasses in particular. All of that really is an ode to that historical figure, like him or not. This movie is also brutal. It's also really brutal. And the sound design and the visual effects, or visual, I guess say choreography, complement that. The punches all land and look like they really hurt. The sound design in particular really stood out for me. Every time he fires the grappling gun and it hits something, it sounds awesome. Everything sounds like it's kind of dirty and on the verge of breaking. That doesn't mean that Bruce doesn't have great tech. He does, but it just sounds very gritty. It's just a gritty sound design. I guess that's the best way I can describe it. I'm not super fond of the music. The theme here doesn't really do anything to stand out. I honestly don't even know who did the score. It's a little repetitive, and I think it's slightly detrimental to the film. It doesn't drag it down too much, but I noticed that I didn't notice the music, and the music is there, and I didn't enjoy the score in this. And the last thing I want to talk about is the Batmobile, because I don't really hear this being talked about too much either. The Batmobile in this is not super prominent, but the introduction of it is amazing. And we've had some cool Batmobile entrances before. The Tumbler, when he's pancaking cars and flying on rooftops in The Dark Knight, in Batman Begins, is probably the most notable introduction of that car. And here it is rad what they do with it. I was super impressed. You've seen bits and pieces of it from the film's marketing and trailers, but the actual moment where they reveal this thing is amazing, and I love it. And I love this Batmobile. It's not a super special car, but except for the massive like jet engine on the back of it, it's just rad what they do with it and how they treat it. It doesn't feature super prominently, but when it's there, it's great. So long story short, I like a lot of things about this, and there's really two things that kind of intertwine that I don't. This movie is really long. This movie is full on 3 hours long, and I felt it in parts, not too much. I was super engaged with the story, but this is a long movie. There's just no way around it. You could have cut 30 minutes out of the middle of this film and been just fine, and really gotten the story across. And I think they could have done it a little more efficiently. Part of that is due to the nature of the film too. it being a neo-noir detective crime, horror thriller, that's kind of what I think of it overall. Every line of dialogue is super deliberate. Bruce thinks before he speaks, like, a lot, and there's a lot of just silence when I'm like, okay, maybe speed this up, maybe get to the point, but ultimately it's fine. I need to rewatch it, but the movie felt like it dragged. It really did. And I watched a 4-hour Batman movie a year ago. Was that in 2021? Anyway, whenever Zack Snyder's Justice League came out, that movie's 4 hours long, and it moves at a really brisk pace overall. This really just kind of dragged for me in parts. So I think when I go back and see it again, it's not going to be that much of a problem. But I noticed it in the theater on the first sit-in. So I love this movie overall, and I think it is probably my second or third favorite Batman movie. We'll see how I feel about it after a couple months or so. Maybe I watch it again in 6 months. But right now, I adore this film. I think overall it's great. I think Matt Reeves made some bold decisions. I like that this is still Batman. He doesn't kill and he doesn't use guns. He's very different than the Affleck Batman, and he still has his morals and principles and talks about, us being no better than bad guys if we stoop to their level. And that's all well and good. Really like this movie. It hits hard, and Pattinson is a fantastic Batman. So you should check it out. It is in theaters. Thank you so much for watching the video. If you liked it, found it helpful, please consider subscribing. You can also like and share the video. That tells the powers that be that it's worth promoting. And hit me up in the comments. Let me know what you think of The Batman, and I'll see you next Wednesday at 9 a.m.